Welcome to another episode. He's back again, and I have. Well, last time he left me on like we got to talk about psychedelic experiences. We will get to, but I want to ask you a really quick question because I mean we just talked for like 40 minutes before this episode thing, which I didn't even expect to go down that, but it was good. It was relieving. It was fun.
That's what I like to hear because I know you've been going through some shit. I've been going through some shit. So it was good to have that conversation. Help you out on that one, man.
I appreciate it, and I want to talk about. Do you think that the amount of fame, the amount of people that we see get like a bad rep in a way. Like not like maybe the fame we have now, but like certain figures that are kind of the first, like let's say when a country first starts, or when a place first starts, or when anything first starts, the very first person to experience what that is, like the first person that walks on the moon. They get a lot of credit for being the first, but they also get a lot of crap because of all the mistakes that they make. And I look at that person as a paver of the way, like let's take, for example, I think Bill Burr talks about Elvis.
Mm-hmm.
Elvis is this type of figure where it's like everyone knows him from dying on the toilet, and he's also like the king of, they call him the king, thank you very much. But he went through every single pothole, every single disaster, everything you weren't supposed to do when it came into the very first person that exceeded a certain amount of fame. I mean, people looked up to him, people loved him, people played his music. 20 people got probably fucked to his music. And then literally, like, people are like, oh, he died on the toilet, and it's like, hang on a second, like his manager wouldn't let him travel to other countries in fear that he was going to lose popularity here. Money got to his head. The man owned like all these different types of exotic guns with gold engraved stuff to it. Steve Martin even talks about holding 3 of Elvis's guns, and he's just like, want to see my guns, like that whole thing. Like, you start to really look at a lot of famous people and anything, and really in the world, when someone's doing something for the first time, there's no pathway, there's nothing like that. And I consider that with your life as well too. There's no other person doing the exact same thing you're doing. People go, well, there's plenty of podcasters out there. Sure, but nobody's you. Nobody, like you said to me, nobody can understand what's inside of your head. You got to see through your own scope, and nobody can understand what you see behind your own eyes. And then same thing with life. It's your life. You can follow a same template as a bunch of people, but you have to craft it out into your own as well too, and make the mistakes that it has.
Absolutely. The Elvis is a good example, but I immediately also thought about Jack Dempsey. Have you ever heard of Jack Dempsey?
I've
He's
heard of them. Yeah.
the boxer that Mike Tyson modeled his basic boxing set over, right? He was kind of a mauler. He was smaller, but he was a guy that originally started out, and I just heard about this yesterday, that originally started out as pretty much a hobo that traveled the country on railway and fought in bars. And in one case, he didn't eat for 2 days, and he got knocked down like 7 or 8 times, and then still ended up winning the fight because he needed that $2 to eat. All right. That's how desperate that man was. And he only got knocked out one time, and that's because he didn't eat for 4 days. He was a hobo. He was homeless, had no money. Eventually, people started to take notice of Jack Dempsey, and his popularity started to rise, and he became a pro boxer. He was actually the first $1 million boxing draw gate. There was over 130,000 people that had watched him, right? And he became very famous and very rich. And interestingly enough, a man that came from such humble roots pretty much got lost in fame. He was accused of being a draft dodger. He was accused of not actually being a working man, because he had staged photos of himself with a worker, but he had like nice, expensive shoes on that was present in the photo, right? So this was a guy that went from nothing to an elite Hollywood kind of celebrity, and only defended his title like 7 times in 7 years or something like that, right? And then eventually lost. And he just got lost in fame, popularity, right? And I think a lot of the reason why is because I don't think people understand that there's a balance, like at all, to what you do in life. And the key, I think, is finding the balance in every level that you get to. And some people get to a level so quickly, they never quite balance out on the other side, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes they balance out later. Like Mike Tyson, I can't think is a good example. Like I think he's almost more popular now than he has been in like 20 years. You know, just everything that they're talking about, just his podcast, his perspectives on psychedelics.
His TV show is amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So, but like the thing about like you mentioned with fame, you know, Elvis, this the same way. Like, yes, people I think remember him dying on a toilet. My father was a huge Elvis fan, so I was around Elvis, and I used to see his movies and you know his hear his music all the time, you know, and biographies, all that stuff. And it was not always roses, you know, and peaches. And even when you're famous or you get to a certain level of fame, it doesn't change the depression that you had when you weren't famous. That's always going to be on you to figure out. But there are examples of people that have figured it out. Joe Rogan, I
Yeah.
think, is a prime example. I don't think he, I think people want to say that and people want to be outraged by what he says now, but he's always said these things. He's always done these things. Been listening to him forever, right? And yes, he is ultra famous now, but he has a unique platform like ours where he can put his personal self on display. And he always has people that can either corroborate or call him out on his bullshit. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? And he's still that person that used to think he was a piece of shit, you know? And he still says that. He's like, if I don't feel like I got a challenge or something to do, I feel like a piece of shit. And I relate with that, but I've allowed myself to make excuses for those feelings for so long that I've gotten comfortable with like the life that I've already built, that it's hard for me to break that comfort and do something else. But in the process of that breaking, I push myself and my walls and my perception of reality, mental health, depression, whatever, further. And it gets easier. It gets better. You get more wisdom and all that stuff, right? Um, so, anyways, we kind of went on a tangent, but I think the thing is I think people can be changed by any environment that they put themselves in, whether it's fame, misfortune, whatever, you know, people are kind of a victim of that circumstance if they've allowed themselves to be predetermined in those circumstances, because I don't think predeterminism is real. I think we have free will, but we're forced down what other people believe is the right path.
So what I've been doing journey wise without psychedelics is trying to rip through my past and tear up my floorboards, I would say. Trying to find every single thing that I thought I knew that I didn't really actually know at the time. And this hit me because I was at my buddy's house and we're hanging out. And he's like, "Did you see they're making another iCarly?" I'm like, "I didn't even like it the first fucking time. I liked one person on that show." You never watched it?
Oh,
There's a guy who played on Drake and Josh. His name was Spencer. He looks the exact same, and that dude's like 50, but he looks like he's in his 20s still. He just doesn't age. He's like Brad Pitt a little bit.
yeah.
But I was watching. He goes, "Yeah, well, the one girl didn't come back because of the thing with Dan Schneider." And I was like, "Dan Schneider created like so many of the old cartoon shows. What thing are you talking about?" And then he goes, "The allegations, the sexual allegations." I'm like, "What?" And he goes, "All these girls that he would like make them do weird scenes and stuff and to get the part." Like Jeanette McCurdy is she talks about it openly, and a lot of people have talked about the horrors of Dan Schneider. I didn't know he was I never even fucking seen his face until I saw a photo of him. I was like, damn, he does look like a fucking creep.
I don't
um
know who he is. Yeah. Yeah.
so he created like Drake and Josh, iCarly, The Amanda Show, which led into Amanda Bynes. I don't know if you know who she is, but she went down a really,
Yeah.
Dan Schneider was one of the causes of her whole entire mental outbreak, a Britney Spears scenario type thing too. And I was like, apparently he had a weird obsession with feet. And then I was like, what the fuck? When they didn't show that many feet on these shows, dude, they clipped up all the foot scenes, and there were sketches where there was like feet, and then fucking like doing like putting mashed potatoes in between the toes as like a joke, as a skit on there, like an SNL type thing. And you realize that's like the dude getting off on the kink. And then you're like, oh my God, like you start look, your whole childhood gets ruined. I felt like I was gonna have like a stroke. I was like, like, oh my God, I didn't even notice this when I was a kid. And there's a scene in a show called Victorious, who I forgot what her fucking name is. She's a really talented singer, Ariana Grande.
Yes.
She's just laying backwards on a bed with her head down, like off the bed. And she's like, I guess I'm going to drink some water. And she just starts drinking water and it's like getting all over in her face. She's like, and screaming as the water's hitting her face. And it's the camera, it's supposed to be like a webcam. That's the purpose of it, was not using professional camera, a webcam shot. Dude, it's like, this is a fucking porn. Like, I didn't even notice this when I was a kid, and I'm watching it now. I'm like, this is all like porno shit. I'm like, no wonder my like dad would be like, what the fuck are you watching when like something like this came on? But you realize like all these people have these horrible horror stories of like, what's it like in Hollywood, even like, and it happens on both ends. It's not just, I mean, maybe there's more on the women's side, but it also happens to men too. That's the issue that I have, is that as a society, we don't talk about these things to a level where it goes that deep. Instead, if it goes, well, hey, it's both genders too, someone just goes, no, you're, and then dismisses you and cuts you off. I don't like that area of topic, because then you're not listening to the other person's perspective on something that they might experience some stuff themselves. I mean, when we get into arguments, Republican, Democrat, any type of political party type thing, as soon as you can agree on a bunch of stuff, but as soon as it comes to a disagreement, they shut the person down and they decide not to fucking continue with that shit. And I think that's really, really stupid. I mean, especially with how politics seems like to be the trending topic of all, mostly because I think a video of Biden came out and he's fucking golfing and he's just walking around like he doesn't know where the fuck he's at. And everyone's like, Jesus Christ. And then like now everyone's obsessed with Kamala because she's going back on everything. And I'm like, look, you, you're putting too much faith, you're having too much of a side, you're being too biased. And I get it because they side with your things, but shouldn't we just want to understand the world a little bit better and make it a better place for future generations? But that's the disguise that the world puts on, is we want to be better, but really we're out for our own initial intent. Like I was talking to you about, was I don't think anybody cares about the person behind them. And I think that's the issue of why we've gotten so fucked and we're in this crazy ass mindset, because people are noticing like, hey, there's a huge issue going on in the world called depression. And we're disguised as a country that gives a shit, like every country does, but they might throw money at it, but it's not fixing the problem. And I think this comes from a place of, we're now starting to give more of a shit about people, but at the same time, in a lot of ways, we're able to kill each other in an instant as soon as something gets dropped our way, which I just look at like, if future, people, let's talk about like Amazon or whatever, these giant monopoly companies. I don't think any of them are like want to suck out your soul and want to pray to Moloch or do any of these things. I don't think that at all. I just think they don't give a shit when money gets thrown their way. They don't give a shit about the people that it's going to affect. They only care about making money, making their life easier, because life is a little bit of pain, because the way we've gotten on this timeline, it's painful. It's not fun. It's not enjoyable. People go, well, I'm having fun. Yeah, but if you really look deep into your shit, are you having fun? Are you able to jet ski whenever you want? You know what I mean? It doesn't fucking happen like that.
Yeah, there's a lot there's a lot there. So the Biden thing is kind of funny because it's like, oh yeah, have you ever golfed? I mean, I guarantee you my ass is out there looking like an idiot trying to find my golf ball because I don't know where the fuck it went half the time.
I get so scared for him because I'm like, people are like, they're grooming him. They're grooming Kamala to be the next one. This is what she was made for.
Get pushed
What?
into a fucking lake with an alligator in one day on the golf course. I'm telling.
well, that's what.
Fucking chucked like boom right into the lake.
Well, like Kamala's like now taking over everything, and now she's going back on all like the immigrant video that came out. She went back on like everything that's why they voted her in for. Like, if you come to our borders, we're not going to let you in. Turn around. You got to come in here legally, not illegally. And it's like going back on everything she said. And I'm like, I'm not even upset with that. Like, I am. That's fucking horrible. But I mean, what do you expect? Is politics too. I hate that answer, but it's true. But I'm like, they're grooming her to be the next one. And I look
Oh,
at Biden, I'm like, how do you live with that? I'm gonna die, and this person's they're already planning on like that's like getting assassinated. Like, it's fucking coming. It's like, hang on a second. They're banking on you croaking during office so they can have her go. Like, they're already like having her go up and do everything. And I'm just like, I couldn't imagine that in my head, knowing, man, they really think my years are numbered.
I got a question for you. How many people that you have these political conversations with actually have any idea who their local government is?
That's a lot. Surprisingly, I think probably most of them that I have conversations with don't really understand what's going on. Like I know everything about my own town. For instance, when my town gets under fire, I'm like, they're like the mayor's this, the this. I'm like, a lot of it comes from our governor, and our governor doesn't know what the fuck happens where we live. So he's paying attention to the main, like we're Ocean City, Maryland is not Baltimore, Maryland. It's not the Baltimore, Maryland's like the hub. That's the headquarters. That's where all the fucking that's where everything is. It's like DC. It's like that's where the president is. Ocean City is like a little branch off like a tumor. I'm like, we got to talk to our mayors and get shit done. I'll tell you a fucked up story. So my uncle, for instance, my cousin actually is my long lost cousin I met. He was like my ninth episode. His name's Corey. His dad, we didn't know his dad had a kid. His dad died when he was like 20 something of cancer, and no one knew that he had a kid. Nobody told him. We found out like 30 years later. And there's a statue that's supposed to be built of my uncle. I don't know the whole logistics of it, but it's still sitting in a warehouse for the past 30 something years. It's a giant silver statue of a dude, surfing on this metal wave. That was raised. All the people that wanted the statue built, they do a surf memorial for my uncle and everything. And I'm like, so why is that statue just sitting there? Why don't we have it built? Well, we got to find the foundation and the land to be able to keep it on without it being torn down once the property's bought. And I was like, well, we have a one statue off 90, which is this giant road, and it's fucking a dolphin, like just a dolphin jumping. And then we have another statue at the other part of town, which is just a bunch of sea turtles. And they go, well, your uncle was going to be in that one spot, but someone had bought out the company. They didn't want a giant. So like he looks like the Silver Surfer, like exactly like that. Like no like dick or anything, just Silver Surfer. And they're like, they didn't want a giant statue of a naked metal man in the middle of town. They wanted sea turtles. And I'm like, so wait a minute. So all the money, the million something dollars that was raised to be able to build this fucking statue is not going to be done. And then it's just been constantly, every time it's brought up, the town passes it, keeps trying to push it down farther, 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 and farther and farther to where it's been 30 something years. I'm like, look, my grandma's 68. Like, like she's not going to be around forever, and I would like to get this thing built, but it's like, well, hold on, we'll pass it over, we'll do this, and it just keeps getting passed over and over and over. I know everything that fucking goes on here, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, this is some corruption bullshit. Like, what are you doing? Like, it doesn't make sense. But it comes into the whole politics. It all comes into schematics. Who's coming to town? We want tourists to see sea turtles, not see a giant statue of a guy surfing. And I'm like, all right, I don't know what to do at this point. I'm powerless.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I mean, hey, I mean, at least you tried. I mean, shit.
At least give us the statue, or I'll put it in our front yard or some shit.
You could do that. That would be kind of cool. See that bitch just surfing
Right in the
right in
like
front of you.
that's money though, like almost $1 million that was raised, all these people that donated and signed a petition, and then they're just like, well, it's in a warehouse and we got to ship it here. And I'm like, well, I don't understand. You're bringing excuses to the table now. And I'm like, why do people want to use excuses rather than just try and figure this shit out? And I get it. Sometimes it's too hard, but it's like we were saying earlier, it's easy to make excuses. It's much harder to do something.
Oh yes, much, much, much harder. And that's the thing. Like, yeah, you know, just like back to the like local government thing. Like, it's easy to go on Facebook and bitch about Biden, but it's hard to go and have a conversation in your local area and do something locally to improve your area and maybe be an example of other places that can model after. None of that happens, um, but I just think it's amazing that people can sit on Facebook or social media and just bitch and moan about Biden golfing, Kamala Harris,
That's what
who's
I'm doing.
but like Kamala Harris is fucking, like border, backtracking. And it's like, I've always said this before, until they get in office, nobody knows what's the real situation is, right? So that backtracking could be a result of what she's been told. And there could be thousands of other reasons, right? That she can't tell you. But the thing is I just think it's funny because they do that. They bitch, they moan, Republican, Democrat, blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, hey, man, who's your mayor? And like in my area, it's like Mayor Rick Kreisman in St. Pete, right? The wastewater issue. Did you ever hear about us having to release fucking wastewater into our channel and our beaches because we couldn't support the overflow during storms. Did you hear anything about that?
No.
No. Well, it should have been news because we contaminated our own fucking area a couple years ago, right? Like, also locally, St. Pete has a new policing type system or whatever, one of the first in the country. Anyways, the point being is a lot of that stuff, a, Rick, whatever the fuck his name is, we'll not say last names anymore, but the dude released wastewater into the bay. Nobody gives a fuck. Nobody wants to talk about that issue and how it impacts, but we want to talk about Biden. You know what I'm saying? Or Trump at the time. It was Trump this, Trump that. And it's like, but what's going on locally? Like right in front of your eyes. How did that even happen? And it happened because outdated sewer systems that never got any love and care because nobody's been focused locally on what's going on here. And then the pandemic kind of forced people to look at this a little bit over here on my side of the world about what's going on locally, and what can I fix now in my own communities? Like, if you can't figure out or do something to help benefit, the next block over, that you may consider the hood or the ghetto, then why do you think Biden or Kamala Harris or whatever's listening to you on social media and is going to come into that neighborhood and do the fixing for you? That's crazy.
I think it goes back to what you
Get
were
up
saying
there.
about Joe Rogan, for instance. Like Joe Rogan, he's been the same consistent person, but once he got super amount of fame, he expects people people expect him to change because now he has a bigger audience. And it's like, no, he's been the same exact person, you know. I think all these people, like people go, well, they lied to get into office. I'm like, I don't know if they necessarily lied. I believe that they had love in their heart. I think Biden and all these people that went and said, every single president that went and said that they were going to do these things, but then once they get in there, they realize they can't. It's impossible because everything that's been set up, because we talked about Elvis, for instance, very first guy going into the fame thing. Next thing you know, after all these people that have followed right after him, there's pathways and stuff where the systems, the labeling companies, all these found a way to keep you under control. You can't use this. We're going to buy your music. We're going to give you studio time, but everything that you create is going to be a part of ours. That means you can't ever play it again. All these different types of things. Same thing with presidency.
Yeah.
The first guy fucked it. Next thing you know, it became this long line of now we're in this rut and someone buried us on top of it. So once you get in, you're like, I'm going to do all these things. They're like, no, you're not. Because if you do that, this happens, this happens, this happens. You're like, oh my God, the world's going to, Jesus is going to come out of the ground and fry everybody's eyes out of their head because we're all sinners. And it's like, yep, that's what happens if you do all these things. You're like, oh my, so what do I do? You're going to continue doing what everyone else has been fucking doing and play fucking ball. And you're like, so it's not necessarily Biden. I laugh because I watch the golfing videos and I'm like, the way they fucking frame this up is fucking horrible. You'll get some dude going, I don't know where the fuck I am. And then it's Biden just walking around with the golf club. And I'm like, I bet he was looking for his ball, but at the same time, the way that the video is memed up.
Oh, yeah.
But I just look at it like you start to examine this type of stuff, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to, dive into like the whole like political analyst and start trying to study what the government's doing. I just want the truth. Is it that hard to ask for the truth? But people don't want to see that. They want some other type of grand conspiracy, or they just don't want to worry about it. And I'm like, look, I get it. But at the same time, we're not going to be able to fix the core issues if they keep distracting us with something, which is just like, there's this video, there's this, there's that, there's this, with this speech blurb. I'm like, hang on a second. Let's talk about what's going on. Why are we doing all these other things that we shouldn't be doing? Why are we trying to influence other people and go to these other topics and stuff? It's like, I don't know, man. It's all tricky business. You start getting political. You come off like Alex Jones and then it goes
Oh
down.
yeah. On it fucking yeah, homosexual toads, right?
Which is true. If you
Yes,
look at
it's true. Yes, it is true. Um, it's interesting. We live in a time where truth is completely objective. I mean, it really is. It's like there may be a truth that you're saying, you know, to 10 people, but like 4 of those people aren't going to listen. They have their own idea of what truth is.
well, did you listen to the Josh Rogan podcast on Joe's?
I probably did, but it's been a minute.
So he
And
talked a lot about like the Chinese government and all this owns a lot of like things over here, like educational institutions and also like all these types. Well, I was listening before this podcast when I was, I was just listening to a Joe Rogan podcast, and it was the Alex Jones and Tim Dillon one because I find that one funny as shit. And they
it's
always say like he's gotten so many stuff right. He goes, the Chinese government owns Hollywood. And I'm like, what? And then Josh Rogan confirmed that 100 episodes later. And then we saw that with John Cena making an apology video. And you're like, oh my fuck. What? Everything he's saying, even though I didn't understand it all at first, I'm like listening to him, like, oh, he's making a lot of fucking sense now that all this information's coming out. So when he starts talking about all this other shit, I'm like, I'm not ruling him out. I've got to stick with that one. I'm going to fucking sit here, take acid, and fucking try and create my own problems.
yeah, I don't think people realize that China's already invaded us. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
that's
it.
scary.
It. I mean, it is, but it is legitimate. What when we banned Huawei phones from this country, a country that is all about capitalism and choice and opportunity, something is fucked up. Something isn't right. But it's littered. They own so much. They own the NBA. I mean, the NBA, backtracked on so much just due to their threats by China because the LeBron James made a comment about Hong Kong and then backtracked, which, by the way, at the time, Hong Kong was ranked third in personal freedoms, which was higher than us. I think we were 16th.
Well, he
And then,
was there was it was a I don't think it was LeBron James. I think it was someone else. It was a broadcaster that was supporting the Hong Kong protests. And then China was like, what'd you and they banned it. And they said 1.5 billion people hated that tweet, considered it racist, even though Twitter's banned in China. So it's like, how are 1.5 billion people complaining about it if they don't even have Twitter to access it? Like they didn't have phones. They skipped the whole landline generation. They went straight to iPhones, like from no phone to an iPhone. And everyone's like, what? And then there was an app on their phone. It was a casino app. And they're like, oh my God, $50 is on here. Let me fucking, I'm going to play it. And they played it and they put their credit card information in to get the money that they won. And then they kept playing and then they got into debt. And then a couple hours later, they heard a knock on their door and it's the triads. During the whole Hong Kong protest, you would think a gang would be like, yes, tear it up so the government gets off our fucking back so we can do shit. No, the gangs were attacking the protesters. They were beating the shit out of them, making them stay inside of their homes. And you're like, why is the gangs stopping a protest against the government and the establishment? And you realize they're fucking working together. And you're like, oh, fuck. And this is when we talk about like nobody just cares about the people after them. If you can get power, you don't give a fuck who it hurts. If you don't know those people, if you have a disconnect with those people. And that's where I say America, it's a couple hundred years old. It's doing pretty fucking quick, but a lot of it comes from handouts too. We are asking for handouts from every single country, which gives them lobbyists to come into our country and have control in things that we do. And it's like, this is where I'm like, look, we can't live the American dream, the American ideal if we accept so much. And I get it because we want to be progressive. If someone offered, in World of Warcraft, let's take it back to gaming, like the first time we talked. If someone level 90 says, I'm going to run you through every dungeon and get you to level 50 from level 1 and give you all this amazing loot, you're going to say, fuck yeah. But then if they say, well, it's going to, it's going to mess up your group, your buddy who's going to play with you. You guys aren't going to be able to level together. I don't give a shit. I'll fucking run them through too. That's the idea, but it never turns out that way. Next thing you know, your buddy doesn't want to play with you because you're at such a high level. He wants to play it naturally, and you guys don't talk for however long it takes for him to get to level 50. It's a good example.
it's a pretty good example.
It's happened to me multiple times.
Really? Damn. That sucks. So what do you want to know about psychedelics?
I love how we're just taking that fucking quick. All right. What, tell me about your experience. I get it. Hold on. Before we get to that, I do want to say with all the political stuff we just talked about, everything like that, you can't focus on it as much as I do, or you can't focus on it. You got to also make sure you are mentally well too, because it will bring you down. Future tripping is a huge thing that I've been experiencing that we talked a little bit off air about. It's because I'm worrying about things that I probably shouldn't be worrying about. For a kid that's 23, I should be worrying about my dick falling off from how many times I've been using it. I'm not worried about that type of stuff. I'm worried about gray hairs in my beard, and I'm worried about like, I don't know, going to Wawa and coming across a bunch of Amish people. I'm happy they're alive, but why are they here? I don't know. It's difficult. But yes, with psychedelics, for instance, you ended on like, I want to tell you about my psychedelic experience. How deep did it go, and what did you discover? For what did you take? Just take me through the trip.
So I've done shrooms a few times,
Okay.
uh, which I absolutely enjoy. It's one of my favorite things to do. So here's the thing. A couple friends of ours, or mine, ours. I've been listening to The Sopranos too much, or not
Have you
listening.
seen the show with when they take out all the cursing?
No,
It's like a minute long.
that's hilarious. Yeah,
It's
no.
like the dude walks in the door, then it's him leaving, and it's like, oh, that whole entire scene got cut.
Yeah, no, no, no. That this is like full on Sopranos. Anyway, so I've heard about psychedelics before, heard about the experiences before, heard about that. It kind of gets you almost in it connects you with things that you are surrounded by that you don't necessarily feel that connection with necessarily. And sometimes you get it, by being in nature and all this shit. You have that like this connection with the earth and the world. Anyway, so got shrooms, and always get them from a reliable source because if you get the wrong ones, it'll kill you. Just FYI. Anyways, did shrooms, ate them. They are terrible to eat. Just a fucking nightmare. You got to get you got to get them down. But long story short, on that part is I think about 30 to 45 minutes. We're all sitting out front of my buddy's house, and we got glow sticks and music on, and
Oh wait.
yeah, the glow sticks start, just swaying, but there's nothing going on. Things just start kind of moving and taking, weird kind of shapes and out of this light, and we were in like right out front. There's cars that would potentially come by every now and again. And what, I'm just kind of sitting there and I'm like listening for whatever reason. We decided Kesha Timber on repeat was the song we were going to fucking listen to for 3 hours on shrooms, which is the worst choice ever when you really think about it. But at the time, it was like appropriate with the glow sticks and shit. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I'm sitting there, obviously see my friends around me. We're all kind of having this moment where we realize like we are gonna trip balls here in a minute. And I remember just kind of looking off to space and seeing the trees at the neighbor's house sway, and then on kind of like a few sways, I kind of felt like it was like a slow motion to it, but I almost felt like I was part of what was occurring, and the things from that point on around me, uh, I was more aware of. Right, I was more in tune of the moment. Um, that Earth is very much alive, like it's living. It sounds so stupid, but it's like you don't feel the Earth move, when you're
That's a
standing.
lie. I've been high as shit, and I've stood there and I felt it rotate.
It's psychedelic, and you will be like, wait a minute. You'll have a moment where you're like, oh no, this is moving. Like I feel this. Like I feel that this is alive. That this is a ball for real. This isn't some fucking pancake. You know.
Yeah.
And so we're 3 hours of that shit, right? Right. We decide we're gonna go swimming, and just for everybody's awareness, swimming is not a good idea unless you have supervision, because what'll happen is you'll start floating in the water, and you'll start like going underwater and like floating down, and you're in this moment and you don't want to come up. Like it's bizarre. Like I think I held my breath for longer than I've ever held. Like I was in this zone underwater. But I remember all of my like depression, my anxiety, my fear of life, of I actually had all this anxiety because I was about to go on my first cruise the next day. That's why part of the reason why I wanted to do it. I was like, I want to go do this and see what happens. And I had so much anxiety, so much worry about this boat and fucking is this going to be the Titanic,
Yeah.
like this bullshit, and
That's
so
funny. I was about to ask that. Like, were you afraid that you weren't going to come back?
Exactly. It was exactly it. I don't know what to expect. My grandpa actually said, he's like, if you're ever going to join the military, because at the time I was talking about, he's like, join like the army or something like that, be on land. So if something goes wrong, at least you're on land. But if you go out and sea and something goes south, you're at fucking sea.
the,
Like,
the biggest thing I didn't even realize, I was talking to a Disney employee who works on like the Disney cruises. So I had to
yeah,
ask all like the dumb Disney myths and stuff like that. But I was like, so what's the craziest thing about like a Disney cruise? And she's like, there's a morgue on the ship. And I don't know why that was so surprising because, yeah, you're not going to put the dead bodies in like a room or anything like that, but there's a designated morgue because there's just like, yeah, sometimes someone's going to die. I'm like, damn. I'm like, didn't even think about that. That you like Vikings sent them out to sea and fucking tossed an arrow.
yeah, bro, or just yeah, ooh. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. There's definitely a jail, like Carnival jails, and a real thing that's legit. Uh, People get thrown in Carnival jail all the time. But yeah, the morgue actually makes sense. Somebody, just dies in their sleep. It could just be that easy, right?
Or drowns in the fucking wave pool.
Dude, yeah, that would, on shrooms. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because at that time, I don't give a fuck.
If you're taking a Disney crew or cruise, just take shrooms.
Dude, I mean, I totally fucking would because like you're not like it doesn't create like the bath salt situation for me, like fucking crazy Miami guy biting people's head, faces off. You remember that?
Yeah.
None of that happens. Like it is just a fun, profound experience. And so I finally pulled myself out of the water, and my buddy and I, we decided we're gonna ride bikes to Walgreens. And I'm telling you, we were just fucking just a madman, just full of fucking energy, just going. And I think what's most profound about psychedelics is it literally grounds you and puts you into the moment in a way that you don't normally get or haven't usually gotten for maybe a long time because, hectic life, anxiety, future thought, depression, shit like that, right? Gets you. This kind of peels all that away. And it sounds like it's magic, but it really kind of is. I mean, that's why they call it magic mushrooms. Like, that's part of it. It does help you get your shit in order, and understand that they're just feelings and that those feelings don't have to stick with you every day, every day. And that's what I was talking about depression. Like, I've been down deep, dark holes of depression, but every year since I got aware of it, I get out of it so much faster, just by knowing that I got to force myself or I got to go do this or I got to do that. Um, for some people, like I think Mike Tyson talks about it, psilocybin, magic mushrooms. Sometimes that's what it takes for people to kind of just reset, microdosing that. And I actually think it's a more effective technique to microdose those than Prozac, Zoloft, and all that shit, believe it or not. Now, when you microdose, you're not tripping balls, but you're getting enough. But in my experience, that just made me feel more connected to the world outside of the human connection. Because you have that human connection, you can feel connected by talking with people, but you don't necessarily have that connection with the earth, or the ground, the surroundings, the animals, and everything was more vivid and more aware. And when that happens, you're not thinking about China or all the bullshit that's going on in your life. You're thinking about that moment in what life is at that moment. That your point of view is of course very unique to you, and how you interpret that data that's coming in is of course unique to you. And for me, I looked at it as like, okay, I used to have doubt that there was a connection to all this, that we were not all made up of certain things. And now I don't. I don't have those doubts. We are all made up of something,
Yeah.
whether it's stardust or light or whatever the hell they talk about. I don't know the answers to that, but I will never say that there isn't anything after life either. I don't know is the bottom line. And I think people that think that they do have to get real with themselves. Nobody really knows until you go, but you can't dismiss and or, you can't say there's nothing after life. You don't know. In fact, I even thought about it. What if afterlife is the real life that is at the end of it? You know what I mean? What if life is setting you up for that eternity of promise and happiness? Maybe that would be an amazing ass thing, or maybe it's not. But I, at that moment, believed wholeheartedly that something's out there, something exists, um, that life is very different than what I previously perceived it to be. You know, it was just me kind of existing in the world. Now it's like life is everything and all around me, you know. When you have like that greater connection, you don't just feel like 1 in 8 billion. You kind of feel like a larger collective of billions and billions of things, you know, of everything. You know, we all belong here at this moment in time, you know. So, anyways,
Do you
what I
believe in the idea that like people vibrate at a frequency? Like obviously we vibrate at a frequency, but do you believe like there's a meditation or something that gets you to a point like that?
so we are energy, like the energy emits from us, right? And people do give out vibes. And the reason why I also believe that is, are you a dog owner?
I was.
Oh, sorry to hear that. If
It's
you
been
know,
a while.
okay. So I got two dogs. All right. And then we also have a family dog named Sasha that my sister has. Sasha has a unique ability to tell when people are a piece of shit. Okay.
Did she bark?
Oh no, she will fucking go after that person.
Oh God. I don't know if I'm a piece of shit.
No, what I mean is that some dogs really understand the vibe that you put out, right? That and pick up on that a lot better than we do, because the person that was my best friend and he turned out to be a real fucking scumbag. Like, we joke that he could secretly be a serial killer, but he secretly could be. Like,
See, there's a there
vibe that he's putting out.
my old
Never.
supervisor at my work, we kept hiring all these people and I kept saying no, 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 just no, no to those people. She's like, why? I'm like, I don't get a feeling. I got a bad feeling that it's not going to work out. And each one of those, it was 8 people, all fucking did not work out. And she's like, I'm going to listen to you whenever you say something. I was like, that's been like that my whole life. I've gotten a feeling about somebody. I've warned them. Nobody believes me. That's why I say, look, I'm going to tell you this. You're going to do your own mistakes. You're going to do whatever. And then you're going to realize I was right. Had a podcast dude that was in the game with game. I helped him like, get his show going. He was in it for a year. And then he was like, dude, it's just all this, all this, all this. And I'm like, dude, everything I warned you about falling into, because I had went through it myself. It's like if Elvis talks to one of those famous people and lets them know I went through this, I went through this, I went through this. You got to start to realize like they're giving you advice because they went through it themselves. And it's funny because the frequency thing I'm talking about is I'm going to try and paint a very picture, a good vivid picture of what I experience on a daily basis, where I can kind of don't even need psychedelics to realize this, is that when I'm so many things I'm neglecting, so many things because I'm trying. I think with all the China stuff, all the other stuff, I get like really intense and really fucking worried about and focused on. It's because I'm starting to try and vibrate at a higher frequency to try and feel like that's going to make some type of impact on something that it doesn't have an impact on. You know, it's not really, it's like farting in the wind. It's not doing anything to affect those, but I start vibrating at a higher frequency because it's like losing touch with the earth, but at the same time being trying to be more in touch with the idea of the problems of what it's experiencing. Like for me, I'm walking around on a daily basis, just it feels like you're getting sucked into like a hyperdrive. You know, you see the space going real fast. It's like that, like all around me, except what I'm seeing in front of me, like a tunnel vision type way. And then when I'm sitting outside and I like this morning, for instance, thunderstorming, but it was just thunder in the air, like lightning, all that stuff. No rain, none of that. Just hot, and you saw thunder, like heat lightning. And I'm driving to work. Now the sun's out, but it's hard raining. So it's like this weird, like, what is this weather? And you start to experience it, the feeling in the air. It's like everything throughout your whole entire life. Like you're talking about, for instance, with psychedelics, it's like you start to realize everything you've been neglecting because your other focuses have been now in tune with the other problems that are in your head, not what's experiencing around you. The fact that, like, I always say my sense of touch is the most important thing that I have because it keeps me grounded because I have ADHD. I'm all over the fucking place. I'm thinking about this isn't talking, whatever. But when I rub my fingers together, that feeling of my thumbprint, my fingerprints, it brings me to a base level where I can sit and observe. Like for me, time can go by like I'll be sitting and it'll feel like it's going by hours in a minute. But then sometimes it goes by so quick I don't even have time to realize it. Like we've almost been talking for an hour and a half, even though we started recording like 40 minutes in. You know what I mean? So it's like you start to look at these types of things like, is it because you're now vibrating at a different frequency and your priorities change, or you enjoy the moment so much? Like time is a construct of man. But how have you been able to label it as so much as this thing that we all go by, this way to coordinate how the world works, how, we're spinning on this fucking, and then my mind goes down the ADHD rabbit hole where it starts thinking of all these things where I'm like, look, take a deep breath, relax, realize I'm in this, I'm doing this right now. I'm sitting, I can feel the fucking chair seat. I can tell that this chair is coming towards its end because I can feel the fucking plastic going into my ass rather than the fucking cushion that's supposed to be there. Like you start realizing these types
Yeah.
of things and it can keep you grounded in a world that seems like you're shouting into a void.
That's actually exactly what the world is right now. That's what social media is. That's what the bitching and moaning about, on social media and everything like that, about things that you can complain about. But again, outside of that 5-minute tweet, what are you doing? What's your vibe like? And I guarantee you, people that, and I had an ex that spent all day doing nothing but watching YouTube about Donald Trump and pretty much hating that man, that her vibe would change just based on those videos. And I had known whether or not she spent all day doing that or not. You know what I mean? And the frequency thing you talked about, or vibing on a different level, I think that, you know, there is a true level to all of that, right? And you get to certain levels and then you can kind of break through, right? And get to the people. Like, it's not uncommon for somebody to be completely poor, unknown, and broke to then become famous and suddenly befriend these politicians and have influence over these people. You know what I mean? That's not uncommon. But what's the journey to get there? Is it a lot of bullshit talking, or what did you personally do to act on the things that you said you were going to do? That's the problem. You want to be on a different frequency, then do things that put you on a different frequency. Just don't talk about these things. Do things to self-improve your life, to figure out your own mental demons, right? And be that example. And that levels you up and gets you closer to your end goal. If your end goal is, I do want to actually have a voice in China or this or that, then build that platform. But you're going to start with, audience of one or two people to get to hundreds. Everything is about starting somewhere and building from there. But we don't want to go through that. People just want it to happen instantly. They go on social media and bitch and moan about it, and they get instant gratification that they've virtue signaled and made everybody on their Facebook page know that they're outraged. But what have they actually done to do anything about actually solving, going back to the local thing? Have you cared about your local government? Do you take a say in the police that happens in your local government? No, then what the fuck are you doing bitching and moaning about people that are in Washington, D.C., that don't give a fuck about you, that will not come to your neighborhood that next to you to fix these things? But if you want that to happen and you want to have that influence, you got a path to go on that you have to act through, that you can't just bullshit through. And that's the problem with everybody. Is everybody's bullshitting it. They talk a big game. Nobody does anything about it at all. You want to fix the problems, care about your local police force, figure out what's good for your local police force and shit like that, and stop trying to get into the country narrative of defund or whatever. Think for yourself instead of this whole holistic pedestal where the highest people in a company, your goddamn CEO isn't talking to me. You know what I mean? Like, but why do you think that, somebody in that level of government is going to come in and do anything for you?
I
You
think
know,
for me, for instance, I know I'm not going to have any reasonable
got 5 minutes,
change.
by the way.
What's up?
I got 5 minutes and I gotta go.
Really? Oh, okay. I'm about to say, I think I don't like, I know, for instance, I don't have any reasonable change or any effect that could really hit any of these giant platforms or political things, for instance. But I do understand that I think a better theory than we're all at a frequency is that we're all kind of code. I think when you absorb the code that's around you, I think when you end up being so involved in your environment or so many things that, people surround themselves in certain communities, they think all exactly the same because they're being told and they're being reimbursed with the same exact things. The best thing I can do, like when I was trying to get the statue built of my uncle, I asked my grandma, she's like, I don't want you even worrying about it. I said, it's been like 30 something years. Don't you want this thing built? And she was like, I understand that I have no power in any of this. They're going to build whatever the fuck they want to build. And if sadly, if that's not the statue, if it's this type of thing, the only thing is get a bunch of people that will rise up against it. But even then, something's going to happen that's going to distract them. It's the same thing that happens with this. Everyone gets all into this giant group, goes all into these political things. You start seeing a little bit of change, which is amazing that a social media platform or anything like that, someone can do this, but it also gets used in the wrong way where someone will say something without looking into it. And next thing you know, they're labeling somebody. And then it's a bunch of people attacking because they think it's all in this great homage of protection of like, we need to get this to change. This is horrible. And they don't understand the full story. And then my grandma was like, I don't want you wasting your fucking life doing this because it's not going to change. It's not going to happen in my lifetime. And I'm like, but I want to do that for you. I want to help you out. She goes, look, there's so much other stuff that goes into the whole governments. They're going to build whatever they want. The best thing you can do is not waste a minute of your life being miserable about it. Just go live your life. Okay. I'm at peace with it. And it's like this whole thing, like I still want to help a little bit, but at the same time, she's right. It's you're trying to move factors that necessarily it needs an army for. And sadly, it's so easy to distract and get everybody on the same level where they want to keep fighting and fighting and fighting.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. I mean, that's pretty much what sums up this whole conversation we've had is we just want to keep saying and talking shit, but nothing ever gets solved that way. And that's what I'm trying to say is stop it. End that cycle. We can solve it other ways. There is ways of doing
Talking
that.
shit's so much fun.
The best way is to give a fuck about yourself and balance your yin and the yang so that when you do have these conversations, you don't get shut down by somebody that has a contrary point of view or feel personally attacked, because that's the other thing. People take this shit so personal, and it's like, okay, I get it. They hold dear to you, but to the point where you're just not going to talk to anybody anymore. Or I have a friend that won't even date a Republican, like at all.
What is if they're hot?
Because she thinks that they don't care about humans. And I need to challenge more on my podcast.
Jesus.
And I go, what I should have said was, it's not that they don't care about humans. It's that they think that how to handle these situations are different than the
100%.
you want to handle these situations. You want to handle it by such and such a magical man again in fucking Washington, D.C. to come and swoop down and fix all your issues. That's not the case. In fact, I'm saying it right now. You need to start locally. Then you need to start at the state level. Then when you get that shit figured out and you're involved in that, then maybe get on your soapbox and talk about the federal level. But again, any fucking company, any big ass company, your peon ass self, in what you would be the local government area, you're not talking to the CEO ever. Okay. But you are still operating your little world that you live in efficiently. That dude, that CEO has no fucking clue what you do, like at all. Not a clue in hell. Apply that to our government and politics. That is what is happening. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, CEOs, CFOs, don't give a fuck about you and have all these state and local governments that are supposed to. But you're so focused on those two motherfuckers.
I'm focused on everybody. I'm fucking looking at,
but I'm talking in general, like that's what everybody wants to bitch and moan about. And it's like, okay, well, so the poverty and all this shit you want to fix, like
I think the Clintons killed that guy that wrote that book about him.
Dude, I mean, yeah, right. And Jeffrey Epstein hung himself, right?
Look, I'm just saying he was producing another book and then now he committed suicide before his book release. And the book was another thing about the Clintons. They're like, it was 6 years ago. I was like, you fucking wait, play the waiting game. It fucking works.
Yeah, it does, and I don't know, man. It's and
It's
we're starting to see how dark and dirty like that stuff is, and that even that's worse in my opinion. But that's all I'm trying to say. Like, I just wish people would give a fuck more about themselves and their present and the people around them, especially like their kids and their family, instead of going on, Facebook and sending that 5 minute bitching and moaning. How about you just send a text to like a friend or a family member that says, "Hey man, how you doing? Hope you have a good day. Hit me up later if you want to chat." Just change the mindset, alter that path so you're not sitting there, engaging in fucking negative shit, you know? And that's kind of what people do, I think, and they get comfort into it, and then they get a bunch of likes for it, and they're like, "All right, I'm smart.
I had a
I'm
lot of
not shit."
I had a lot of people tell me to flip the script about something, and I put up a tweet about it, and I was gonna see who really caught on to like the actual message behind it, and that
Yeah,
it was saying like I was people who use comedy use to deflect to make others laugh because inside their own life they're not really happy, and I was looking at it more because one of my all-time favorite comedians is Robin Williams. And it's
yeah,
kind of like Louis body syndrome ended up finding out that what it is what he had. People just thought he killed himself because of depression. It was a multitude of factors. He was going through of a severe stage of dementia when it came to being paranoid, not knowing who he was. And I was looking at it like, if you really look at like my episode, and then you think like, does this person have severe depression or something like that? And you start seeing the comedy and all this type of stuff. You start to realize there's a little bit more there than some kid that's just happy, like a lot of people would come off the scope of view. It's the same thing with Robin Williams. I'm watching that now, knowing that he had all this depression issues, and I'm like, oh my God, you can really see it. But no one knows it until it's too late. I get the compliment of I connect people, or I use this. I'm like, I'm a fucking stepping stone. And
yeah.
like that's what I talk to people like people just use me to get to somebody else. And I don't think they intentionally mean to do that, but that's how it works. And if that's all I'm good for, you can realize where I have this like, holy fuck, like this is what life is just helping everybody else out, not being able to perform yourself. But I get it. I mean, I think we're all on these paths and journeys. And I think that's what's scary is we just want an answer to know where at least we're on the right path. And sadly, I don't think anybody really understands what that is. And I think it's just feeling like you're not doing something wrong.
Yeah, yeah. I think that is exactly it. Is I hate feeling like I'm doing something wrong, or I have an opinion that is wrong, or whatever. Hate it. But at the same time, the only way you're going to get to the right is sometimes being wrong. I mean, it's failure and success 101, you know? And that's the other issue is people say the wrong shit and they're immediately fucking canceled, or they're immediately, you know, the human aspect is thrown out the window. They don't give a fuck. They forget that we're all humans. We all make mistakes. We all say dumbass shit, and people hold you through just your words. It could just be a sentence very quickly. And that's kind of fucked up if you really think about it. Like that's how quick you write somebody off, you know? But I don't know, man. I just don't know anymore about what people are expecting, out of this life that we've kind of created here. What is your end goal? Is the question I want to ask anybody and everything. Like, what's your end goal?
I think it's that's a good way to think of it when you say like I don't know anymore. I think it's good not to know. I think a lot of things are. I mean, it's scary when it comes into your own life, but when you are trying to assess what the world is, no one really knows. I watched a debate
True.
between religious people and non-religious people, and they're talking about God. And then the one dude was like, "Do you think this thing was created?" And all the religious people and even the non-religious people sat down and goes, "It was created." But sadly, I'm a skeptic too. I'm a priest and I'm a skeptic. And he's like going off about all this stuff. And you start to realize nobody knows. Like they asked the question, what about the end? What comes after? Everyone's like, rabbis, like, I don't fucking know. I don't, I just, nobody knew. And it's like this fear of like, you don't know. But, if you have your faith, if you have your beliefs, the best thing you can do is make sure that in your own mindset, you're safe and your own thought, your brain, this pain of fear and depression that comes into your head, it's so hard because we're exchanging energy constantly through social media now and through all these types of things where it's like you're reading it as a text and not reading it as a person anymore. But I think it's gonna hit this point where people are just gonna start. I don't want people to be like, I'm not talking to anybody today. Today's my today day where I'm just staying at home. I want people to understand that you can care about someone else without hurting yourself. You can care about other people without hurting yourself. You can care about yourself without hurting anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And the I don't know is actually a good thing for me, like because I lived in a place where I thought I knew, and I don't have a fucking clue. Like, I don't know shit. Okay, about shit. I don't. My path is unique. My path is a path that my sister might not go down, or a friend, or anything else. And yet, so many of us think that we know it. We have the answers. We know what life. What's the key? Nobody has the key but yourself. It's in your own pocket, and you're never gonna let somebody pick that pocket again. You know,
I like
and
that.
fuck that shit. Like fuck that. Like, this is your life. And you just got to stop and think about, what do you want out of it? Not necessarily like, what happens after life or at the end. No, the end is, what end goal do you want to achieve out of what you're doing? Is there no end goal? Is it just monotonous? Then maybe you should assess whether it matters or not. And at the time, it may matter because you're frustrated, you're pissed, and all that. But then you got to realize that there might be 5 minutes and a Facebook status, and then 45 minutes later, you've thought about a million other things since then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's all of us. It's just sometimes we just regurgitate some of those things out in social media and in the world. And that's not a bad thing, but do it in a positive way then. You know, don't don't just be an asshole about politics, or saying shit that because you believe in one way or another, I'm not going to do this, or hate a person because of that. The whole thing about this country especially is not to hate anybody, you know and somehow everybody will find a reason, whether it's Republican, Democrat, black or white, freaking Jew, Catholic, whatever. They're going to do it. And again, I love my friend, but to be somebody on the left that's supposed to be the bleeding heart, to say that about somebody on the right and having that perspective makes her a hypocrite. 100%. And I don't give a shit if that bothers her, if she hears it. I I am not afraid of that. I'm afraid of somebody not telling her that. That's what I'm afraid of. And that's what's happening. Is people don't have the balls to say shit like that anymore. They just let people think what they think, feel how they feel, and hate what they hate. And it's like, you know what? Fuck this. You know what? Why do you hate me? Let's talk about that, and let's see what I can do to make you like me. And if we don't make progress, then at least we can try. But it doesn't happen, man. I fucking hate Biden because he's a Democrat, or I fucking hate Trump because he's a Republican, or blah 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 blah. And it's like, Jesus, is that really where we're at?
I hate and love them all. I just don't think one person should be running the country. I know it's not, but it's still at the
Should be
same
a
time.
But like, I go back to the company thing. Like, yeah, there's a CEO, but like the CEO it reports to a board. Okay,
Yeah.
the board makes the final say, right? Well, right, but that's kind of how this country should be ran. It's ridiculous that we have a new president every 4 years. Goddamn geriatric for a president now. Weekend at Bernie's is any day, any day.
Don't say that. I
Kidding.
feel so bad that it has to look that way through life, like people just waiting for him to kick the bucket.
I'm sorry to do this, man. I'm getting actually pinged to go to work.
You're good, man. We talked for like 45 minutes before this, which is my bad. But I appreciate you for coming back on. Bradley, where can people find your links?
Yes. So you can find my podcast on Instagram at the Panic Attack Podcast. You can find me on Twitter at the Panic Attack. And you find me on any podcast platform at the Panic Attack Podcast. And that's with a C, not a. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's a K, not a C. I'm an idiot. Anyways, it's a play on my last name. That's why.
I'll make sure I link it all in the description. Is there anything you want to end on?
Oh shit, man. I just hope that anything that you've been going through recently, man, you grab the bull by the horns and you kind of get out of that, and hope shit goes better for you.
I appreciate it, man.
And,
I'm gonna start a porn page. If anybody wants to see Tom Holland get naked, that's how we go.
let's do this again, my dude.
For sure.